The diplomatic chamber aboard the Celestial Harmony gleamed with polished titanium and crystalline displays, a testament to the Galactic Council's commitment to neutral ground. Ambassador Ajax Thor of the Valerian Empire stood at the center of the room, his four arms gesturing with practiced superiority as he addressed the assembled delegates. His translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that conveyed his disdain more eloquently than words ever could. And so, Thor continued, his voice carrying the melodic yet condescending tone his species was known for. We must discuss the humans' application for full council membership. I find it premature, to say the least. Captain Sarah Chun sat rigid in her seat, her jaw clenched as she maintained the diplomatic composure that had been drilled into her during 6 months of protocol training. Beside her, Ambassador Marcus Webb, Earth's chief diplomat, placed a steadying hand on the table between them. They had expected resistance, but Thor's contempt was exceeding even their worst projections. The humans, Thor said, turning his large, multifaceted eyes toward the Earth delegation, are a species that has barely escaped their own gravity well. They squabble over resources on a single planet. They have yet to master faster-than-light travel without our assistance. Tell me, honored delegates, what precisely do they bring to this council? Ambassador Webb stood, his silver hair catching the ambient light. With respect, Ambassador Thor, humanity brings innovation, determination, and a unique perspective. Thor's laugh was like chimes in a storm. You mean the perspective of children playing with toys they don't understand? Your species discovered quantum entanglement communication last year. We've been using it for 15 millennia. The Valerians' words stung because they contained truth. Humanity was young, cosmically speaking. Earth had joined the galactic community only 30 years ago, when the first visitor ship had landed in Geneva. Since then, humans had been playing catch-up, desperately trying to prove they belonged among civilizations that had been exploring the stars since before Homo sapiens had learned to make fire. Captain Chin's fists clenched beneath the table. She had served in the United Earth Space Navy for 12 years, had commanded 3 deep space missions, and had lost good people to the dangers of a universe that didn't care about human fragility. To hear this pompous diplomat dismiss her entire species as irrelevant made her blood boil. Furthermore, Thor continued, clearly enjoying himself. Let us address the elephant in the room. A human expression, I believe. Your military capabilities are laughable. Your largest warship carries fewer than 500 souls. Our escort vessels carry 10,000. Your weapons technology is antiquated. Your tactics are borrowed from species who mastered warfare before your sun ignited. That's enough, Captain Chin said, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. Thor turned to her, his expression radiating amusement. Ah, the military representative speaks. Tell me, Captain Chin, is it? How many space battles has your species won? None, Chin admitted, her voice steady. Because we've never started one. Precisely my point. You lack the strength, the will, the ship shuddered. It wasn't a violent motion, but in the zero-gravity environment of space, any unexpected movement was cause for alarm. The crystalline displays flickered, and a klaxon began to wail, a deep, resonating sound that Chen recognized from her emergency training. The chamber's main screen activated, showing the face of Commander Threll, the Arcosian officer commanding the Celestial Harmony. His reptilian features were twisted in barely controlled panic. All delegates, this is an emergency announcement. We have suffered a catastrophic failure in our primary navigation system. A solar flare has disrupted our quantum processors, and we are currently on a collision course with the debris field of Kepler 442b. Impact in 17 minutes. The room erupted in chaos. Delegates from a dozen species began speaking at once, their various methods of communication creating a cacophony of sound, light, and even telepathic pressure that made Chin's temples throb. What about your pilot? Ambassador Webb shouted over the noise. Commander Threll's expression grew grimmer. Lieutenant Voss is unconscious. The same electromagnetic pulse that damaged our systems caused a feedback loop through his neural interface. Our medical team is treating him, but he won't wake in time. We need someone qualified to fly a diplomatic cruiser, and we need them now. Silence fell over the chamber like a shroud. Diplomatic cruisers weren't like standard starships. They were massive, complex vessels designed to house hundreds of delegates from dozens of species, each with different environmental needs. Flying one required not just skill, but intimate knowledge of systems that were deliberately obtuse, designed by committee, incorporating technologies from 20 different civilizations. Surely one of your crew, Thor began. My crew are specialists, Threll interrupted. We have engineers, diplomats, security personnel, medical staff. Lieutenant Voss is our only qualified pilot. Standard protocol, diplomatic vessels don't carry redundant pilots. It's a budget constraint. Chun felt her heart racing. She knew what was coming next. Any galactic cruiser pilots on board? Commander Threll asked, his voice carrying the weight of desperation. The silence stretched. Chun looked around the room. Thor and his delegation remained seated, their earlier confidence evaporating. The Marcosian delegates, a species of gaseous beings contained in elegant crystalline suits, pulsed nervously. The Threen representatives, insectoid beings known for their logical minds, clicked their mandibles in distress, but offered nothing. Captain Sarachin stood. I am, she said quietly. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. Thor's bioluminescent patterns flickered with what could only be described as disbelief. You, he said. A human? You expect us to believe. Before joining Earth's diplomatic corps, Chin said, her voice gaining strength. I spent 8 years as a test pilot. 3 of those years were spent in exchange programs with the Arcosian Navy and the Valerian Merchant Fleet. I'm certified on everything from atmospheric fighters to heavy cargo haulers. I've logged over 10,000 hours on simulators for vessels I'll never fly, because that's what we do. We learn. We study. We prepare. She turned to Commander Threll. I've never flown a diplomatic cruiser in real space, but I've run the simulations. All 47 variants. It was part of my cross-training. Why? Thor demanded. Why would you waste time learning to fly ships you had no business piloting? Chun looked at him, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she smiled. Because we knew that one day, someone might need us too. Commander Threll's expression transformed from desperation to hope. Captain Chun, we'll transfer you to the bridge immediately. 16 minutes to impact. The bridge of the Celestial Harmony was a cathedral of technology. Holographic displays floated in the air like captured stars, and the pilot's chair sat at the center of a sphere of controls that would have overwhelmed most beings. Chin settled into the seat, her hands moving with practiced efficiency across the haptic interfaces. Captain, Commander Threll said from his station, you should know, the debris field we're approaching contains fragments moving at 30 kilometers per second. Some pieces are the size of small moons. The navigation computer is offline. You'll have to fly manually through the field, while simultaneously calculating a safe vector away from the system's gravity well. Understood, Chin said, her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Her fingers danced across the controls, bringing up system diagnostics. Engines, functional at 93%. Shields, 60% and holding. Good enough. She pulled up a 3-dimensional map of the debris field, her mind already plotting trajectories. This was what she had trained for, not in the academic sense, but in the deep, instinctual way that came from thousands of hours of practice. Her hands moved before her conscious mind could complete the calculations, trusting muscle memory and spatial awareness honed over years of flying. The ship began to move in the diplomatic chamber. The delegates watched on the main screen as Captain Chun threaded the massive cruiser through gaps that seemed impossibly small. The ship rolled, dove, climbed in 3-dimensional space with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large that a chunk of planetary debris the size of Manhattan hurtled toward them. Chun fired the port thrusters, and the ship spun on its axis, the fragment missing them by less than a kilometer. Before the ship's rotation could carry them into another collision, she fired the starboard thrusters, arrested the spin, and boosted forward through a gap between 2 massive asteroids. Impossible, Thor whispered. The reaction time required, 14 minutes, Commander Threll announced, his voice tight with tension. Chin's hands never stopped moving. She wasn't just avoiding obstacles, she was using them. When a large fragment threatened to block their path, she skirted its edge, using its gravity to slingshot the ship around it, gaining speed while changing direction. It was a maneuver that would have been dangerous in a fighter craft. In a diplomatic cruiser carrying thousands of souls, it should have been suicidal, but Chen made it look easy. 10 minutes. Sweat beaded on Chen's forehead, but her voice remained steady. Commander, I need you to divert all available power to the forward shields. We're going to punch through. Punch through? Captain, the density of the field increases ahead. If we try to, trust me. Commander Threll hesitated for only a moment. All power to forward shields. The ship accelerated. Where before Chun had been dancing through the debris, now she was charging like a bull. But it wasn't reckless. She had seen something in the patterns, a path that existed for only a brief window. A channel where the orbital mechanics of the debris created a temporary gap. The ship shuddered as smaller fragments peppered the shields. Alarms wailed. In the diplomatic chamber, several delegates closed their eyes or their equivalent. ZYX Thor gripped his seat. His earlier arrogance completely vanished. And then they were through. The celestial harmony emerged from the debris field into clear space. And Shin immediately began plotting a course away from the system's gravity well. Her fingers flew across the controls, calculating jump coordinates, preparing the ship's FTL drives. 5 minutes to safe jump distance, she announced. The bridge was silent except for the hum of systems recovering from the ordeal. Commander Threll stared at his instruments, then at Chun, then back at his instruments. Captain Chun, he said slowly, what you just did, that level of skill. I've been in the Arcosian Navy for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Chun allowed herself a small smile. Commander, when you're from a species that learned to fly less than 2 centuries ago, you tend to approach it with a certain enthusiasm. Back in the diplomatic chamber, Ambassador Webb was grinning from ear to ear. The other delegates were stirring, talking among themselves, their earlier fear transforming into something else. Respect, perhaps, or at least a reassessment of their assumptions. Waxthor sat alone, his bioluminescent patterns dim and subdued. When Shin finally returned to the chamber, having guided the ship safely to a stable orbit around a nearby uninhabited planet, he stood slowly. Captain Chun, he said, his voice lacking its earlier condescension, I owe you an apology. I spoke from a position of prejudice and ignorance. You saved us all. Chun stopped in front of him, her expression unreadable. Ambassador, you were right about some things. Humanity is young. We are still learning. We haven't mastered technologies that other species have used for millennia. She paused, and her expression hardened into something fierce and proud. But what we lack in experience, we make up for in determination. Every time we fall, we get back up. Every time we fail, we learn. Every time someone tells us something is impossible, we make it our mission to prove them wrong. You asked what humanity brings to the Galactic Council. We bring perspective, the perspective of a species that knows what it's like to start from nothing and claw our way up. We bring humility, because we know we don't have all the answers. And we bring skill, because when you have to work twice as hard to achieve half as much, you either get very good or you don't survive. The chamber was silent. ZYX looked at her for a long moment, then performed a gesture with his 4 arms that Chen recognized as a Valerian sign of deep respect. I will support Earth's application for full council membership, he said quietly, and I will personally sponsor a cultural exchange program between our species. Perhaps my people have much to learn from yours. Chen nodded. And we from yours, Ambassador. That's the point of all this, isn't it? Not to compete, but to grow together. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, preparing to compose reports about the day's dramatic events, Ambassador Webb approached Chun with tears in his eyes. Sarah, he said, you just changed everything for our species. Chun shook her head. No, Marcus. I just did my job. But maybe that's exactly what they needed to see. That humans show up. That we do the work. That when someone asks, any galactic cruiser pilots on board, there will always be a human who stands up and says, I am. She looked out the viewport at the stars beyond, at the vast universe that humanity was only beginning to explore, and she smiled. We're not the strongest species, she said softly. We're not the oldest or the wisest. But we're here, we're learning, and we're not going anywhere. Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings who flew between them. But aboard the celestial harmony, something had shifted. A door had opened. And humanity, in its young, stubborn, unstoppable way, had just stepped through, the galaxy would never quite be the same.